Hello, welcome. I'm Maureen Ballatori. This is designing and executing your annual strategic plan for Visit NC Farms. Um, this content that we're getting into here is a real deep dive into the idea of building your own strategic plan. If you haven't already watched the top 5 marketing strategies to take your business to the next level video and you're just starting out, that may be a good one to start with. It's not required. This certainly is good to stand alone, but it is more a little bit more advanced content. We're talking about financial reviews and real deep dive into strategic planning. And so if you are a little bit earlier stage, go watch that top 5 marketing strategies video, and then this will build on it well. If you're a little bit further along in your agritourism destination business, then this will be a fine place for you to continue. I am Maureen Ballatori. I'm the founder and CEO of Agency 29. We are a brand building firm for food, beverage, and agriculture. We work with a number of agritourism destinations all over the United States, and we have clients all over the world. I grew up on a dairy farm in upstate New York, and my team is based also primarily in the Northeast region of the US. We help clients solve big creative problems, and so this structure of strategic planning that I'm about to take you through is something that we've worked on with clients large and small across the board, and it's a real scalable framework for you to use to build the annual strategic plan for your business. So here is the 10,000 foot perspective, the big picture view of what we're going to be going through together over the next hour. And that will be a look back primarily at marketing analytics as well as a financial analysis. We'll talk a little bit about benchmarking and brainstorming, both for competitors and aspirational brands. We're going to talk about smart goal setting, marketing planning, and then the concept of measurement. So, this is all built on a cycle of plan, implement, analyze, repeat. And so, those 4 steps that you're doing throughout the course of a year are the idea behind what you're doing for your annual strategic planning. And the process that I'm about to take you through in terms of how to build that plan are really what we're focusing on in the majority of this, and then we'll talk a little bit more about those other steps as well. So when we think about the idea of planning, we're going to start with a look back, and so that's in, like I said, those marketing analytics as well as the financials for the business. And so from a marketing analytics standpoint, I'm primarily talking about social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, so on and so forth. SMS texting, if you're doing any of that, would be another one to include here, an evaluation of your SMS system. Uh, Email marketing like MailChimp and Constant Contact, as well as media mentions. You want to Google the name of your business and see what comes up. What are the news stories? How do you rank in the Google results? What are the reviews on your Google business page? Those are a big deal because they help people understand what people come to you for, what they love about you, what the overall assessment is, and it also tells you a lot about your customers are experiencing when they're coming to your destination. And so if you have very few reviews on Google, that is a good thing to build up. It really does make a difference in your not only discoverability, but building trust with new customers to come to the destination. So we're going to start with an analysis of the social media platforms. And what you're seeing here are outputs from a system that we use with clients called Dash This. And so that's essentially just a dashboard that you plug all of these systems in. And so you plug in Facebook and Google Analytics and LinkedIn and email and all that stuff. And it feeds into one dashboard that you can control the data period for, or the timeline that you want to see your data for. And so you can just as easily get this information on your platform directly. So you can go right into Facebook, into the back end, and you can see page impressions and fans and the content and so on and so forth. It doesn't, it might not all be on the same page, for example. It might not calculate your page engagement rate, that sort of thing. So even if you don't use a system like this, you can still evaluate it. Just might look a little different. So essentially, what I'm looking to do as I'm designing and executing the annual strategic plan for a business in this look back period is I want to see what I observe, right? I want to see what stands out as something that is interesting, above benchmark, below benchmark, that may come up in these analytics. So based on what I'm seeing here in this output, let's see what I observed. So we're expecting to see that this biggest lift is happening in season. So this is their busy period. So no surprise there. It is nice to see that they have some increasing engagement leading into that busy season, which is great. We wouldn't want to see these lower. I would love to see them a bit higher leading into that busy season, but it's nice to see that it's starting to lift mid-year here. And so just as a big picture idea too. So each of these bars is a month. And so this is January and this is December to give you an idea. So this is the fall. There is some pretty slow page growth. And so make sure that you're inviting people to like the page when they're engaging with your content, especially if you're running ads on the platform, to convert those folks into followers so that they can get your future content without you having to advertise to them. The other great thing that we're seeing here is across the board, this 3.93% page engagement rate is a great percentage. So the bar for page engagement, it really should be above 3%. If your page engagement is below 3%, you're going to want to do some work there. You may want to run some ads to help with discoverability to get in front of people. Of course, before you throw money at any ad machine, you want to make sure that the platform has your target audience there and that you're not spending a bunch of advertising to reach the wrong audience. So that's another thing to consider before you start doing any advertising. But with respect to page engagement rate, 3% is the bar. So this 3.93 is great on average across the course of the year. But what is even greater is the fact that from June to October, they're an average of 5% page engagement rates, which is what we would expect and want to see, that larger engagement happening throughout, leading up to and during the season. Now, one of the things that can happen, let's say that this business ran ads in November or in October, say, to change this bar to like double the height. The page engagement rate may go down because depending on how targeted your ads are and how well performing your ads are, as your impressions go up, if you don't also get engagement that goes up at the same rate, then your engagement can go down if you're reaching more people, but they're not engaged. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're evaluating some of these metrics. When you get to advertising, that can really start to skew some of these factors, and you should be aware of that in your analysis. So we also want to look at what are the top posts by the engagement on the page. And again, this is throughout the course of the year. So the very top post for Facebook was focused on gamification. So that's the structure of the post itself was gamified with the idea of come and find the wine. This event is happening. It was a gamified post and there were people, so actual faces in the content that was being shared. So we're noting that to observe it for future content development. The second most popular one was a drool-worthy food post. So it was something that showed like a milkshake drink with a donut on top, and it was just, I think, somebody holding that beverage, the milkshake. And so we want to be aware of the fact that this drool-worthy food post was the second most popular post throughout the whole course of the year. What can we observe for that? The other interesting factor is that the fifth most popular post here was the one where they're announcing that they're open for the season. And so that's good to note, just to be aware of. We want to make sure that we don't miss that post in future seasons and that we're leveraging other local media to make sure that we're, having them help amplify our opening and knowing that that kind of content resonates really well with the audience. One of the other things I observed as I was evaluating the Facebook presence here is it's so important to respond to all of the comments that people are commenting on your post. So essentially, even when something like this is happening where Shayna is tagging Carly in the post, you want to comment on this to see if you can keep the conversation going. Like, Carly, hope to see you on the farm. And this one where Jennifer is tagging her friends and saying, maybe we could meet up one Friday this summer. If you've got a special Friday pizza happening, you could reply to this and say, don't miss pizza on the patio. It's one of our best events of the week. Hope to see you here. Something along those lines, right? But you're trying to continue the conversation. One of the even better things that you can try to do is ask a question in your response to prompt them to answer the question and keep the conversation going. Now, why is this important? Because as the conversations are continuing in the comments on a post, the platform is seeing that as quality content and is going to show it to more people. So that's going to help your impressions and your engagement rate. And that's going to help your discoverability and people seeing your content on these platforms. So some of the key takeaways that I observed in this Facebook analysis is that from a photography standpoint, the candid photos, people in action smiling at the camera, were doing really, really well. The farm was also posting some bad angles and you couldn't really see people's faces. It was hard to see what was going on. So they had some room for improvement to make sure that they're continuing to post interesting angles or up close shots of people enjoying something. Some were just too far away. They were too dark. Like I said, hard to see what was going on. From a captions and content standpoint, you want to be clear about what's happening when and use descriptive language to entice people. So instead of saying, don't miss Friday's event, you want to say, Friday, we do pizza on the patio from 6 to 8 at this farm. And you want to make sure that, Susie has said that it's the highlight of her week, right? So that is more engaging type content and it's giving people more of the information that they need to be able to come and visit your destination. Room for improvement in this was using the engagement tactics with the commenting like we talked about, as well as just in general in your captions on photos. You want to make sure that you're asking questions, you're using polls, you're running contests. Be careful with contests. That's a whole legal thing. I am not an attorney or your legal advisor, but it is a point of concern to be aware of, that it can be a slippery slope with contests. But they are a highly engaging way to work with people. So carrying this into Instagram, we're similar dashboard here, right? We're looking at what does the data look like, and then what can we observe from that. So observations on the Instagram platform, no surprise to see the boost in season, but I did expect to see a longer lift in engagement leading up to this. So I would have loved to see like a bit of a higher bump here, and I would have loved to see the spike last longer to look more like this. So this is a nice bump in September, October. Very low engagement rate. And it was interesting too, when you're doing this analysis, this is why this is so important, is because you wouldn't have known that this engagement rate necessarily was so much lower than Facebook until you look at the data. But that's wildly lower, right? 1.87 versus just shy of 4% on the Facebook platform. And then what we're seeing on Instagram too is 2 top posts are that drool-worthy food content. There's our open for the season post that also did very well on Facebook. So again, we're just collecting these sort of observations from a what did well over the course of the season standpoint. Key takeaways that I observed on Instagram for this. And again, you're just going to apply the same philosophy to your content. So I observed that the food does very well. Top post for the year was a dessert making reel. And then from a captions and content standpoint, you want to make sure that you're using a mix of post types. And so what that means is you can do like a static post, which is just an image, a reel, which is a short form video, vertical video content, carousels, which is multiple photos in a single post so that people have to swipe through to see them. And then sharing content to stories and posting organic content to stories as well. Using that mix of different types of content helps engage people in different ways. And then this philosophy too that we just talked about with Facebook, the idea of asking questions, using polls, encouraging engagement, those sorts of things do really well on that platform. Also recommended considering a day in the life or behind the scenes sort of content to build the story for this farm. And that's primarily because there was some content that we were seeing that was performing well, but we thought it had an opportunity to perform better because we were comparing that to some of the website data that we were seeing, that the story content about their family and their background was doing very well. So it makes sense, right, to carry that over to some of the social media platforms. So then moving to the main website, again, we're looking at the data. What is the data telling us? What can we sort of see in terms of the forest through the trees or the trees in the forest, I guess it would be. Um, was, what could we do to help bump this August traffic? Again, we're trying to get a little bit more of a lift leading into the season. And then what could happen for after season sales? I mean, this is such a drastic drop off, which is, I'm sure very common in ag tourism. You're shutting down in October. Why wouldn't it drastically go down in November? But for these folks, they have an incredible gift shop. And so I said, what if you continued that gift shop into November and even early December to do gifting for people for the holidays? It could be an interesting way to extend the season. You wouldn't have to have quite as many staff. You could entice some of your best staff to stay on a little longer. And so just some ideas that, again, looking at this content can help ideate and prompt some new ways to continue to grow the business. So we're seeing what is called, so this is a Squarespace website. And so it segments it visits by geo, which is geography. And Google Analytics does this as well. It's just in a different place. It looks a little different, but again, same type of content. And so what we're seeing is that the most of their visitors are visiting their website from the United States. And within the United States, it's primarily New York, followed by California, which I thought was really interesting. Why would that be? Not sure. I don't have the answer. And that's another thing, is that looking at some of this information, some of it's going to be perplexing in the data that's being served to you, right? Of like, why do we have folks from the other side of the country visiting this website so much more than Pennsylvania, which is 3 or 4 hours south? So some of it you're not going to have an answer to, but it's about observing and just having that knowledge. And so then when we drop down on New York, what are the cities that people are coming from most often? And so the destination is in Rochester. And so Fairport is a suburb of Rochester. So is Macedon. So those are no surprise. But what is interesting here is that Buffalo is showing up pretty high here, which is about an hour, maybe an hour and a half from this destination. And so the fact that they're getting so much traffic from there already, they're not doing any targeted marketing in that area. What if they did? Right? What if they did start running some ads or do some placements or, some targeting special events for folks from Buffalo to entice them to come even more? What could that mean for the growth of the business? And so those are things to note as you're preparing this annual strategic plan. We also want to look at, with the website traffic, page visits in particular. So typically it's really common that the homepage is the first one, just where people go, right? But like, what is coming up next? What are some of the additional pages that people go to? Are they going to the pages on the website that we want them to? Are they going somewhere interesting that we didn't think that they were visiting that much, but we are observing that they are? So for example, this is just their about the team page, about the family, about the farm in the background. And they had no idea that this ranked so highly and was something that people were so interested in about. And it's a page that people are visiting and spending more time there than they're spending on the calendar page on average, right? So interesting little nugget. So being aware of those things, again, can inform, okay, we're getting a lot of people on the page to learn about the family. Let's transcend that into our email campaigns, into our marketing campaigns, and vice versa, right? That they should make sure that they have a page on the site that talks about the food, because those drool-worthy food posts do so well on the social media platforms. So then here we're seeing referral sources. Where is the traffic coming from? That's what the referral source means. Sometimes the content shows up a little weird. So the social media traffic that's coming directly from Instagram would be somebody coming to the page directly from a link on the Instagram platform. However, on Instagram, they are using Linktree to help make linking of post content a little bit easier. And so therefore, when you're counting these numbers, you really have to combine this Instagram traffic with this Linktree traffic, because that's what that traffic is. Um, Interesting to see so much content coming, so many people coming from Reddit. So like, look yourself up on Reddit, very popular platform. What's being said about your destination? What are people saying that you should hear or weren't aware of? Or, how can you lean into that platform to even just be aware of what's being said about you. But again, to double down on it, are there people asking about, agritourism destinations in the region? Is there a Buffalo subreddit on Reddit that you can post about the farm because you know that a bunch of your traffic is coming from Buffalo, right? So those sorts of things that can all inform, but you become aware of them by looking at the data. This was no surprise that they had a bunch of traffic coming from the tourism destination site for the region. But this one was really surprising. They were like, they didn't even know what this was. And so, again, sometimes being aware of where this traffic is coming from can help you double down on that. I blocked this out because this is their like sister site that obviously sends them a bunch of content. So, no surprise there. Looking at email marketing here again, what can we observe? Some platforms are giving more insightful trends than others, I would say. So this data is from Constant Contact, which has some really nice trend data that they're sharing with you off the bat to improve open rates. Here are some things that you could do. This is all about subject line, and so there's some opportunity to improve the open rates and improve the click rates and make sure that you're driving clicks on that content there. And so you in MailChimp, conversely, they're just giving you the reports and you have to kind of make your own inferences about that data to see what it's saying. But the reason why their click rate is so low is because they're not optimizing for click in the design of their emails. And so why is that important? Because the more people click in your emails, the more engaged with your content they are. And so it's all about engaging that consumer, right? And so making sure that that engagement is connected to your big picture goals of what you're looking to achieve. So we're seeing the data of click over open rate for email campaigns. Again, we're just looking for observations here. So we noticed that the open rate is really sporadic over the course. This is only showing the last 50 emails that were sent. And so real big swing here from about, call it 40% to 100% open rate on these, and what observations can we make about that? So it looks like their case club has a pretty decent open rate there. And so, but on the other hand, what has a very low open rate and what could you do to improve that? So diving into the financials, one of the things that we want to look at when you're building your strategic plan. So some of this is it's like collecting the information, right? So you're doing this marketing analysis, you're going through all this data review, and you're making note of the interesting observations to kind of keep an eye on them for future. So we're going to circle back to that in a minute. Let's look at the numbers. So in this financial analysis, I like to look at revenue by stream. So financial stream, income stream, typically by attractions, by food and beverage, and by events, which is how this entity broke it out. And we're looking for year over year seasonal patterns. We're looking for cost structure analysis. It is nice to have key performance indicators like average spend per visitor, return rate, and so on. Your ability to have that information is typically dependent on your ticketing software, how you're keeping track of people who are coming, how long they're staying, that sort of thing is really dependent on your inputs. And so it's nice to have those, but these are sort of the basics that are already going to be in your financial management system. And so in this case, we also did analyze their ticketing system. And what we noticed is that in 2021, they sold the least number of tickets, right? So 15,000 tickets, and they sold those tickets at $16.34. So this was their worst revenue and their worst ticket. So number of tickets actually did go down in 2023. I think I misspoke and said that was the lowest, but this is the lowest. But their ticket price was $19.99, and so their revenue was not the lowest revenue. So it was optimized in 2022, which of course there's other environmental factors here, right? These are post-COVID numbers. That was a big, swing for a lot of agritourism destinations. But essentially what we were looking at here is, did this ticket price drastically impact the number of tickets that were sold? And I think 2024 was an especially rainy year and wet for this region. And so the number of tickets does reflect that. But we're looking at, did this ticket price make a drastic impact negatively on the revenue for the business? because of course we would love to be able to sell tickets for more, right? So what do we notice? Fewer tickets sold in 2023, but it wasn't the lowest income year, and the increased ticket price is not negatively impacting the attendance. I show this because this is what the output from QuickBooks looks like. And I like to take this QuickBooks output and put it into an Excel spreadsheet and give it color scales. Is this absolutely necessary? Absolutely not. But I like to give that data color scales and give it the year over year analysis. And so this is color scaling the attractions revenue year over year. And so it's automatically, and this is just a feature in Excel, it automatically makes the highest number green, the lowest number red, and then the numbers in the middle are colored accordingly. And so I like that because it's very easy to see what's up and what's down year over year. So we have a drastic increase if we are just doing a quick visual look at 2024 compared to 2021. 2021 is very red in these sales areas, and it's very green in these sales areas. And so those years, what can we consider? What can we evaluate, right? Factors to kind of keep in mind. Um, then it is just as we did with the marketing data. What do we notice? What can we observe? So I noticed that there was a 4-year trend of attractions that's down 23% from 2021 versus, I'm sorry, in 2024 compared to 2021. So then it can be a discussion among your team of why do we think this is? Are there external factors that could have impacted this steady decline? Should we consider adding something new? So this financial analysis is critical for your annual strategic planning because it allows you to use the hard data to inspire those conversations of what may need a fresh perspective. So then my other observation was that spirits had huge growth. So again, if we're looking at 2021 versus 2024, just to get that widespread, 2021 spirits revenue 6,434, but it was 14,884 in 2024. So that's a significant increase, 131% since 2021. Beer and cider also grew 40%. Wine stagnant since 2021, but down 16% since 2022. So some of this is just, again, what does that tell us? Maybe it means that this business should double down more on the spirits and the beer and the cider, or do they need to give a little bit more love to wine? All of these things can just sort of impact the discussion that you can have with the awareness of your customer. Events were also significantly down, so 60% since 2022, namely in corporate, private, ticketed, and weddings. And so that became a discussion on should there be a reevaluation of marketing tactics. When I brought this to them, they said, yep, some of this is intentional. We really want to do less weddings. We like these other things that are the birthday, the corporate, and so on. And so then those things can inform your strategic planning, right? You're not going to push weddings. You're going to push these categories. And so the data helps drive that. Farm market's doing excellent. Why are wine gifts similar, which is a similar income stream, so far down? So this was sales in the farm market. We're seeing a drastic increase from 2021 to 2024 here, but wine gifts was drastically down. There was only 300. And so as suspected, they said, well, we combined some things and this is now in that category. And so on and so forth. And so again, those are some factors that only you are going to know as the person who is keeping track of that information and changing it year over year. But you also want to make sure that you're tracking that information somewhere too, so that when you go to look back at this 5 years from now, or the next generation is coming into the destination, they need to have that historical information too. So that's why also reporting on an ongoing basis like this, where you're doing the annual strategic planning the same way year over year, make sure that you're making notes of these observations so that you have something to go back to 5 years from now to say, oh, this was our annual strategic planning document. Here were our notes. Here were our observations. And so typically when I'm doing that process with clients, and what you can do for yourself is build a deck like this. It does not have to be this involved, but how can you go about making these notes and sort of keeping track of this for future so that you can evaluate it for the future of the business. And there's endless right ways to do that, right? Like this is what works for me. It could be maybe an executive summary document for you that just notes those things in a couple pages of notes. There's no wrong way, but it is great if you can be consistent so that, again, 5 years from now, you've got something to look back to. I also noticed that food from a revenue standpoint was doing very well across the board. And so what's great about that is that content is also, as we know, performing very well on Facebook and Instagram. How could we do more of this? Do we do more special offers? Do we just feature the food more in that content? Do we want to explore a new type of food, knowing that category does very well, right? So what what could potentially add to the growth of the business. So big picture, key takeaways from the financial analysis here. What observations can you make about the data that you see? Where are your biggest growth areas, your biggest decline areas? What's your low-hanging fruit with respect to improvement or additions? And then I should also add that that also goes for what is the low-hanging fruit of what you should take away, right? What are you currently doing that's not really moving the needle, not really making a difference in the business that you should just take away so that you can focus on doubling down more on the things that are working. So you want to bring these insights into the brainstorming phase. So again, we've got these thoughts from the marketing insights, we've got the thoughts from the financial insights. Okay, now let's look away. Let's look outside and sort of let that stuff marinate in our head. So again, as part of this planning process, we're going to do some benchmarking and brainstorming, and we're going to do that benchmarking and brainstorming in two ways, looking at competitors and looking at aspirational brands. So when we look at aspirational brands, we want to evaluate certain key areas. And so those may be target market or specialization, their strengths, key takeaways. Maybe you'd note their weaknesses, or room for improvement that you notice when you're doing a deep dive here. These are aspirational brands, meaning it can be someone that you admire that is in your industry. It can be someone in a brand and business in a different industry. It is all about just noting a business that is doing something that you admire so that you can be inspired by what they're doing. And so Disney Resorts is one that comes up often. What can you note about their target market and their specialization and their strengths? And what key takeaways do you observe that you may want to apply to your own business? Cape Kidnappers is a New Zealand, Australia based working sheep farm that has an on-farm resort and a lot of great premium destinations. We're going to talk about that in Premiumize Your Destination session video. If you haven't watched that, that's an opportunity as well. So that Cape Kidnappers, what can we observe there? Wow, I really love the way that they position their excursions. And so what can I learn from that to draw to the business? So this is incomplete on purpose because it's kind of just to show you, get the ideas rolling of being open to that inspiration and those observations in that aspirational brand analysis. And then you're going to do the same thing for your competitors, right? So you're going to name a few of your nearby direct competitors. So this is when someone is considering your agritourism destination over someone else's, where may they want to go instead, so that you can see how you stack up against your local competitors. And so I would recommend you put your business in here as well, so that when you're doing this evaluation of the specialization and the target market and how you may win or lose and your strengths and weaknesses and so on, that you're tracking them against your direct competitors, so that when you think of that target market consumer and the many choices that they have for where they may want to go, you have a clear understanding of why they should choose you, so that in your marketing, you are able to articulate why they should choose you, right? So that helps with that clarity. The other thing that really helps with that clarity, from a business structuring standpoint, as well as from a marketing standpoint, that is related to this annual strategic planning, is the concept of opportunity mapping. And so this is just a tool or a framework that's going to help you go about brainstorming in a structured way, so that you don't just have a blank piece of paper in front of you that is calling your name, but you don't know what to write down. So you want to think big here and brainstorm to fill in these areas. I really like to start by tracking your top revenue drivers for the organization, which you're aware of because you just did that financial review, and track those first so that when you're thinking about areas to innovate and grow and what you might want to change or what you might want to get rid of, that you have those top revenue drivers top of mind. And so I say three because that's a good, just general mix of, a balance, the three legs of the stool, and maybe four for you. It doesn't have to be solid in that area. But again, it's just a great thing to be aware of as you're thinking about, okay, it's feeling like our food, it is clear that our food um, revenue is doing very well. What can we do to do more of that? Do we want to introduce new foods to the menu? What could we do that works with the equipment that we've got? Do we need to invest in new equipment to be able to offer something new? We observed in our aspirational brand analysis that this destination in New Zealand is doing this really unique and remarkable thing, and we want to add that to grow the business. And so again, it's just sort of a good way to capture all of what you just went through in the previous rounds. So then once you have that, you've got all of this information kind of swimming around in your head. I recommend really doing this over the course of like a day or two. Um, you don't want to spread it too far out because you want all of this stuff to be front of mind. And so then you're going to take that front of mind content, and this is all still doable in a day, to take that to your SMART goal setting. And so SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And so I want to go through that financial planning and start setting goals for what the next year could look like. And so, I would recommend building a spreadsheet. I like to link to it right within the doc. And so essentially you're going to duplicate what your 2024 data is, plan it for 2025 and say, okay, this is what we want to change and grow. And then you're setting SMART goals to determine how you want to go about doing that. So SMART goals, as I mentioned, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. And so these are just the factors that you want to keep in mind while you're doing that. Your goals are specific, measurable, connected to your target. You're setting them to determine what your business wants to achieve. With those goals in mind, we're going down here. What are the strategies, the high level plan of action that you're going to utilize to achieve those business goals? And then we're going back down here to the tactics. What are the regular one-off initiatives? What are the things that you're going to do that are going to allow you to achieve and ladder up to the strategy and allow you to get to those goals? Here's another look at what that really looks like. And so you can go bottom up. I recommend going top down, but there may be some bottom up strategies that are like, okay, we know we definitely want to do social media. And so that is sort of a marketing channel that we plan to execute, but we want to do more lives or more reels to engage our audience to really reach a new consumer. And the consumer that we're typically reaching is 45 to 65, and we really want to get the 18 to 35 audience. And so our goal is to grow the younger audiences that we want to attract to the destination. And so one of our strategies to do that is to create content that resonates with that younger audience and post it on social media, right? So that's an example. It may also be that if we want to reach that younger audience and that is our goal KPI, that a strategy may be that we want to create new attractions on the farm that are specifically aligned with what that audience is looking for. And so then the tactic may be researching, what attractions may be feasible and then investing in one or two attractions that are going to be targeted to that audience. Another thing that we can think about is, in this example, let's say this was ABC Farm, and that they wanted to drive event bookings. And so the KPI, key performance indicator, is a specific number of events. It can't just be, we want to have more event bookings. Exactly how many more do you want to have? Because event bookings are more controllable and will likely have a trickle-down impact on attractions, that is a good goal to set that's going to make a difference in the organization. So then with that in mind, we want to drive event bookings and we want to have X many more of them, what are our strategies and tactics to do that? Okay, we want to optimize our packages and landing pages so that we can be clear about what our offerings are. Okay, then to do that, we need to collect testimonials so that people understand that this is a great experience. And then we also need to build special ticketed events and like create what is the event that we're going to do. Is it a first Friday festival? Is it, whatever. We also, let's say we also wanted to reach out to corporate and schools and so on. So essentially, you're just building out this whole framework so that you can then take those tactics, everything that's in that bottom row there, and use those to inform your ongoing marketing throughout the course of the year. So, this is the annual strategic plan, the goals that you're setting, the strategies that you're going to use to reach those goals, and then the tactics that you're going to utilize to execute the strategy that allows you to achieve the goals, right? So, those are the annual strategic plan. So, then from there, that's sort of a like I usually like to take a break here. So if I'm doing a full day annual strategic plan, we will typically try to get up to here in the first half of the day. Sometimes this is the first thing that we'll do if we break for lunch. This is the first thing that we'll do after lunch. But I want to emphasize you need to put in the time to do this well. That analysis that we just went through over the last 40 minutes takes time to pull all those reports and make those observations. I just went through them in 40 minutes, but it took me hours before that to pull that data and put it in and do the review and all of those things. So you really want to give this the time that it deserves, and you will be rewarded by understanding where you have an opportunity to make that impact. So then, as I mentioned, from here, we've got this plan is going to go into, okay, we're going to start planning the implementation so that we understand what the marketing looks like to get to the tactics, to do the strategies to reach the goals. So I like to recapture the goals in this marketing planning and pull it in here so that as I'm building the tactics of what are the marketing channels that I want to focus on, I understand what are the high level goals that the organization is going to achieve. And so you would just continue setting what your goals are for the organization. I do not recommend any more than 3 goals for the year. 4 is a lot to try and achieve, especially for an agritourism business that is typically pretty seasonal. Even if you are going throughout the course of the year, 3 is a lot. So recapturing those goals here so that they're top of mind as you're building your plan. And then I like to go through a quarter by quarter with tracking month to month within that. And so it may be, these are just some examples. It's not an exhaustive list. There may be some other things that you want to consider. But let's say that the farm knows that social media marketing is an impactful thing that moves the needle. I would agree based on the data that we saw, right? So, okay, we want to keep the social media marketing. What sort of frequency makes sense throughout the season? And in this, it is getting busier as we get closer to their heavier season. So it's daily, in September, October, knowing that that's when it's going to be their biggest season. But do they want to launch a podcast? Do they want to do SMS marketing? Do they want to do, what does public relations look like? How often are they sending marketing emails? What events are they attending? What events are they hosting? Especially if the idea here was to drive event bookings, you would want to fill out and structure what events do we want to put in? Do we want to keep those just structured into quarter 3, quarter 4 of the year so that we are very simple in the first half of the year and we're more complex in the second half of the year? We know that we can plan for that. It's all about what you want to build. Some folks are looking to build their shoulder seasons and go into other seasons throughout the course of the year. And others just want to do when they're open very well and don't care to extend that. So it's all about what your intention is, in this process of annual strategic planning helps you hone in what activities and marketing channels you want to execute that line up with your intentions and the goals that you want to set for the business. So you would fill these out, and then these 2 pages, really like this page and this page, would be the things that you tack up next to your desk. We talk about that a lot here at the agency. The idea of the thing that you tack up next to your desk as being something that you want to frequently reference, frequently stay on top of, so that you can make sure that you're operating to it, because it is implement, right? We talked about the cycle here: plan, implement, analyze, repeat. If you don't implement well, then you can't analyze effectively and it affects your plan for the next year. I get this question a lot. What should I spend on advertising? There is no set number. It's different for every business. We recommend staying under 10% of your annual top line revenue. Some businesses do go up to 20%. It really depends on what your profit margins look like, what the structure of the business is. But you want to be able to have again an intention there. So somewhere around 10% is a really good number to just start with. So if you're at 1% of your annual top line revenue is allocated to marketing activities, even if you increased that to 3% or to 5%, what sort of ROI could you get out of that investment? And that's sort of the thing that you want to consider is what is my intention going in? What is my intention that I want to get out of this? What does success look like so that you can raise that investment and understand what your intention is on the other side. And with respect to that idea of what is your intention or what are you getting at the other side, you have to measure. If you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. You have to analyze the effectiveness of how these things are working. And so here are some of the tools that we recommend for that. So I do a quarterly marketing review. We do this with most of our clients. We recommend it for all of our clients. The idea of a quarterly review, looking back at the last 3 months of information as it relates to the prior quarters to see how are we operating to the plan? What does the data look like? We're revisiting the Google Analytics or the Squarespace website analytics, the social media, and so on that basis. And then it's great to also pull a quarterly financial review from QuickBooks or whatever ticketing or tracking software that you're using to keep track of your books to again see where are we. If and when possible to implement new tracking, what would it take to get an understanding of average spend per visitor or return visit rate or, which may require new ticketing software, that sort of thing, attendance, capacity utilization. These are things that would be great to be able to implement. And so you can kind of, keep those in mind for your measurement. I will say for many of the businesses that we work with, quarterly works. For a seasonal agritourism business, depending on the operation, you may need to take it to monthly. It may need to be a weekly analysis, especially if you're a smaller operation that's only open for 5 or 6 weeks throughout the year. You want to look at that week over week, and you want to make sure that you're making notes of external factors that are, impacting the business, like weather or something like that. So when I did this financial review for this business that I benchmarked here, they had notes in a spreadsheet week by week that was just where they were tracking their ticketing data of how many people came, what did they have going on that day? Did they have a special event or was it just general attractions? And what was the weather like or what were those external factors so that they have a note of those when they evaluate the season week over week to see and understand, okay, this weekend was really rainy or it was a gorgeous day. It was a perfect day on the farm, that sort of thing. So keeping track of it is critical moving forward here. So tying this all together, here's a recap of the big picture idea, right? That we are planning this, following this cycle of plan, implement, analyze, repeat. And we are building SMART goals within that structure. And that really the big key takeaway pages or the content that you're looking to flesh out when you're designing your annual strategic plan are this one with the company goals. Again, no more than 3. Make sure that those goals have key performance indicators so that they're specific and smart across the board with those goals, that you have multiple strategies. It should have one is okay. It's great to have 2. Sometimes you'll have 3 strategies under those goals, laddering up to that achievement, and then the tactics of what are the things that you're going to do to continue those strategies to achieve those goals. And then fleshing that out into the quarter by quarter, month by month, could be week by week plan for the business of what you want to execute. And so these are the structures of designing. We talked about plan, implement, analyze, repeat. This is also a presentation on executing your annual strategic plan. And so that is literally just adherence to making sure that you've got the right resources in place to get these things done. If it's not resourced and somebody's not responsible for it, it is unlikely to be happening consistently. And that is one of the biggest areas where we see clients fall short in the execution of their annual strategic plan, is making sure that they have people who are responsible for carrying that baton that is going to help you to achieve that goal. That's it for today on designing and executing your annual strategic plan. Thank you to Visit NC Farms for bringing me in for this content, and I hope you enjoy.